one of the bits of breaking news this morning in the trial was that the attorney for Derek Chauvin motioned for a mistrial, bringing up Representative Maxine Waters' recent comments, which we talked about on the show yesterday. That was denied by the judge, but the judge did seem to imply that the comments from the Congresswoman might play into an appeal, and that in theory, were there to be a guilty verdict here, that the comments from Maxine Waters over the weekend might result in that guilty verdict being overturned in the future. I don't know if you saw that as it was happening, but what do you think about those possibilities?
I think that Auntie Maxine needs to mind her words at a time like this, not necessarily because I think that it is deeply problematic. I just think that we don't want to give any sort of reason at all for something that could be not necessarily a mistrial, as the judge has already ruled on that, but ultimately viewed as either reversible error or something like that. I understand that recently President Biden weighed in on the case as well, also a bad idea. Here's the thing. The jury has been sequestered and instructed not to consume any news whatsoever. So that is the backstop that the judge has created to sort of shield off any accusations of unfair prejudice or undue prejudice against the defendant for something like this. However, what we don't want to see happen is somebody gets a whiff of that and then it becomes a conversation in the jury deliberation room. Of course, the judge has given instructions in accordance with the law, but what I can tell you from actual experience is that that doesn't always hold up. It doesn't always happen in that way. And so because of that, you just want to not leave things up to chance. And so while I can appreciate the vigor of Congresswoman Waters, I just think in this situation, it's something that I feel like she should have stayed away from. Okay. You know, we're just too close to the finish line. I don't disagree with her sentiment. I don't have a problem with what she said. I just think that the stakes are simply too high to have put that where it is right now.
Sure. One thing I wanted to mention though, because in our coverage of the comments yesterday, we talked about the way that Fox News was sort of obsessively focusing on them. And we occasionally will analyze when there's news that's from the perspective of a right winger to be inconvenient. The right will sometimes, Fox News will sometimes come up with a weird angle on it. More often they just don't talk about the news if it's inconvenient. They didn't talk about the second impeachment trial very much on Fox. They didn't talk about the Capitol attack as it was happening very much. And actually I saw this morning data from the Stanford Cable News Analyzer. Throughout the course of this entire month, Fox News, up until the end of the weekend, had talked about it for 4.2 minutes. Like the Chauvin trial, the trial that caps off a year of this social movement, they had been silent, but not since the Maxine Waters comments. It has been nonstop about Maxine Waters. So it's just, I like political communication, I like passion. It's good to see that they got their passion back for this story, sort of. They can find an inroad to actually talk about it now.
Well, I find that very interesting, especially from a credibility standpoint, for a news organization to devote so little time to the story when arguably this is the biggest trial on a criminal level that we have seen, particularly as it relates to police misconduct ever. I would argue that this is bigger than OJ. And the reason why I say, I'm sorry, I think it is bigger than OJ. But that was a civil trial and it wasn't involving police misconduct. I think that this is bigger than the Rodney King trial. And I think it's bigger than the Rodney King trial because it's global and it has global implications. And we have seen so many different instances of misconduct in so many different cases that the entire world is tuned in to the outcome of this trial to try to understand, are you guys gonna do this again? So I think that this is the biggest trial of its nature that we've seen, and I'm just kind of surprised, wink, wink, that a news organization has decided that it's not newsworthy enough for them to cover. Because I'm just kind of wondering, so what's the bigger story or stories that you are finding? It's not surprising to me that Maxine Waters' comments have been politicized in a way that they have seized upon. Of course, it's bait, but the fact that they have devoted so little coverage to the actual trial itself, it should be very telling for what we already know about Fox News.
Yeah. And as I alluded to in the intro to the show, we were talking a little bit about this before, and you made some great points about how there's this sort of like super high profile case, and like the best case scenario, I forget the exact analogy you made, but it was something about that it's like there's a fear that people will treat it as some sort of ceiling when it really should be the floor.
Right.
That like the best that can be done is what rationally should be the obvious expectation, like that might not even happen. And that's, I don't know. I feel dread basically because we've been through cases similar to this, maybe not as high profile nationally or internationally as you point out, where no, the rational thing didn't happen. And so it's a weird feeling to like be mentally stretching towards something that should be automatic.
Yeah, people have sort of made this a one-off, John, and they kind of sort of, I know someone used the analogy to me and said, George Floyd is, he's a one of one. And I was just like, what planet have you been on? He's absolutely nothing of the sort. And the reaction that I gave was rooted in the fact that, like, ostensibly, I would challenge you or any of your viewers to draw clear and strong distinctions between George Floyd and Eric Garner, right? Like, what's the difference there? Draw a difference between George Floyd, Eric Garner, Alton Sterling, and Walter Scott. All caught on video. Terrence Crutcher, all caught on video, right? Like instance after instance after instance. So while we have, in somewhat of a degree of hopefulness, attached this weight to this case as though it is the gold standard of American jurisprudence and justice, we should be clear that this is not our ceiling, it is our floor. Yeah. If it takes a man in the prone position, already in restraints, not resisting, being killed on camera in broad daylight with a police officer's knee on his neck, if it takes all of that for us to secure a conviction, and that's sort of the bar that we're setting, then Black lives do not matter to the degree that folks are saying. And I think that folks need to be honest about that and be very, very clear about that in terms of how we contextualize and what type of weight and perspective we attach to where this case sits in the sort of pantheon of justice and jurisprudence around police and state-sanctioned violence against Black bodies.
Yeah. And as we've talked about, I'm sure you've been brought on cable news to talk about the fact that like the final days of the deliberation and the actual case we're going on, we have multiple high-profile instances of fatal police brutality, including against children. Like it's sort of a reminder that no matter what happens in this particular case, no matter which charge ends up sticking or not, we're in a bad situation. It is not a solution. It is at best, well, it's not as bad as it might have been.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.